Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Wisdom Circle. I've got my friend Tony Ponturo here. We are in the back-to-school mode. It's after Labor Day. Things are starting up in many ways, sports and school, and vacations are over for the most part. So it's got that feeling we've all had for a very long time in our lives. Getting cooler, nights are shorter. I kind of like it. I kind of don't like it, but it is what it is. We live, and we're happy to be here. Tony, are you happy to be here?
Absolutely. I'm just
Good.
glad we haven't been canceled yet. Like in the old days, you can just keep producing and no one can cancel you. So that's good.
Well, it's good to be the executive producer, the owner, the founder. I mean, what the hell?
Well, we always said that everyone individually is going to be their own network, and I guess that's sort of coming true. We sort of scoffed at it probably 20 years ago, but reality is here. It's the
Who was the 15 minutes of fame guy? There was a guy with a quote that everybody's going to have their 15 minutes of fame. That might have been Andy Warhol, actually.
Yeah, I think it was Andy Warhol.
Way back. I mean,
that's amazing you actually came up with that name.
Hey, guys, stay sharp. That's why we're here. We don't just read the paper, take a nap, eat lunch, take another nap, read another paper, take another nap.
Well, it's interesting. It's a bit of a digress, but you're used to me now. But when internet companies, were first coming on and wanted to get advertisers, they would say to us, we'll give you, meaning Anheuser-Busch, 1% of the company, 5% of the company, just give us $50,000 so we could. And I went to management, above me, the president and CEO, and they went, no, you just worry about selling beer. Don't worry about that. But I've often wondered if we had taken 5% of some of these websites, what that would have added up today,
Yes, when I was doing some rights deals, I had, companies willing to do the same thing. And I don't know if at Raycom, that was our business, so I didn't have to ask. But
Right.
Once you get to Comcast NBC, the answer always came back, that's not the business we're in. We're not, if we're going to buy something, we'll buy it. But we're renters of rights. We're not going to, unless we start up. John Miller, who has done an amazing job back when NBC Sports had almost nothing. We used to call him, when I was at OMD, we called him NBC Sport because they only had the Olympics. They'd lost NBA, they'd lost the NFL, they'd lost Major League Baseball. And John went out and he started the golf event in Tahoe, where he is like the king of Tahoe. He's the dog show, might be the most profitable thing in the history of NBC after the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So those things they were okay with, and for all the right reasons. But in general, yeah, you're right. You're right, exactly.
They have to keep evolving. I just watched, you and I haven't talked about it, but I just caught up to the movie Blackberry.
It's on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, and at one point they had 45% of the mobile phone market, and I still have my Blackberry somewhere in the attic. And then they watching a video of Steve Jobs saying, okay, we have this thing now called the iPhone. I give them sort of a pause on this because if you have 45% of the market, it's tough to say, well, we should evolve ourselves and have another form of the phone. But they didn't. And then when iPhone got so popular and then they tried to catch up, it was sort of too late and they didn't do it well. Right. And they turned out to be a one-trick pony. That was a great pony at the time.
Right.
But now they're obviously out of business. So the idea of continuing to evolve, invent, change, experiment is so important.
Yeah. As we are doing.
So what do we got going? We got started the NFL season yet last night, just to give some context of where we are in the calendar talking here today. You have the U.S. Open tennis going on.
Yeah.
What's any brilliant thoughts on the start of both of those things?
Well, I didn't mention that in the opening remarks about the NFL, but obviously it's NFL season, which turns a lot of people on big time, and college football and all that. But so Taylor Swift won last night, so that was a good start. Lord knows.
Do you like Travis Kelce's haircut? That's the most important thing.
Not for me, but I'm not telling them I don't like it. Kick me out the door. So yeah, I mean, it is a juggernaut. It gets bigger and bigger. Sports gets bigger and bigger. So I think that's a healthy place to have been and continue to be. Um, if you want to jump in on that, go right ahead. But I really do want to talk a little bit as we keep our eye on our chat time of the U.S. Open and how that seems to be different this year.
Yeah, no, that's. Why don't you start with that? Because I was going to go there, but on I think a different theme of that. So you just get started.
Yeah. No, so I think I just know that there was always a place where you couldn't get in, and people complained about it, and now, or it was too expensive, and now people who are in are complaining about having gotten in, and the food lines are long, and the games are starting late, and you wonder, capacity, and I mean capacity, like how many weeks can you play it? Can't play it for 13, you got 2. And how many people can you jam into a place? And at what point, and I know we have different sides of this, right? At what point are you just straining the system? And then you get, everything's got a great, some bell curves are longer at the top than others, right? And is this a moment, flex moment for the U.S. Open or not? I don't know. I don't think it's going to get any smaller. And the U.S. participation over the next couple of days is not going to make it any smaller. I can't imagine. But tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I always go with the premise, sadly, in sports that everything's driven by, the dollar. More money, more revenue. And I can remember in the AB days that we would say, what was the CPI, right? Let's call it 3%. That would be the cost increase of our beer. We never wanted to gouge the consumer, and it was better to do a steady growth and keep it going than all of a sudden say, oh, yeah, could we get 10% increase? Sure, we could. But what would that do to, what if you lost 2% on volume growth? So I was there, last Wednesday, and the grounds, what sports have become, and certainly the U.S. Open, and I respect what they're doing there in Lucia and the USTA, it's become a festival, and there's a lot of people. And as I walked around, it was tough to see, was anyone even watching tennis? They're at the Mojito bar. They're doing the Grey Goose and melon drinks. But even I was, thankfully in a suite, but as I wanted to walk around a little bit, it was actually too crowded to even get into some of the grandstand kind of elements. So, and the USTA has talked about it, said, well, we haven't sold more tickets, but we're getting more people coming who bought a ticket, general admission, than in the past. I'm not sure I buy that, but it starts to become a negative experience if it's, you can't move and you can't get into the side courts. And so that has to be observed and managed if you're the USTA.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, and you can't. I don't think you could. Maybe you could make it a longer tournament. I don't know if the players could. I don't know. They're gonna have to think about it because everything does hit that flex point.
The other thing, and it's not even us in the business, play golf with someone in a totally different business when he worked, and it was like, why did the U.S. Open and ESPN put the women's semifinal up against the NFL? And it was like, well, that's a good question, and. Right. You know better than I, having spent a lot of time on the broadcast side. It's like, okay, where do we think we can maximize ratings and advertising dollars because it's prime time, 7 to call it 10 with the 2 women events versus a 4 to 6. But one could argue that would a 4 to 6 have been better, to not go up against the NFL? We're sort of posing the question mark, have their own platform, and would that have been better for them?
Yeah. Look, I had a sign on my wall for 30 years that said, if you serve the fan will serve you. And the question then is, because they're both trying to kill each other, right? I mean, ESPN's loving to pull some audience away from the NFL. The NFL kind of doesn't really care much about the U.S. Open, but they might have to start thinking about it. And what are you doing to the East Coast viewers when you're starting games at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock to be prime time? What are you doing to the advertisers? What are you doing other than cashing a check? And at some point, does that check have some diminishing returns on fan base? Because boy, that's the be all and end all. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing, is any management is getting people to think about a 5 or 10-year horizon versus a 30-day horizon. One of the things when we took the business in house, the media and sports marketing, and really August Bush's reason for that, other than controlling the people that manage the money, was I want people looking out for the company 5 or 10 years. I don't want a brand manager who, if he doesn't or she doesn't serve the brand well in a year, may be off the brand. So he really wanted people that had a scope going out versus a narrow scope right there.
Yeah. And that, and it's a competitive world out there. At another time, we'll talk about the NBA deal, private equity coming in. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but I think for today, might be time to turn it over and
absolutely let's get our guest host in
and have some wise words and very current and very successful words from Dan Lovinger. So Dan is the president, maybe chairman, biggest title you got. He's in charge of the Olympic sales for NBC Universal, really Comcast NBC Universal. So giant job when you think about the kind of money they've committed and the brand identity associated with NBC and the Olympics and what it just did for them over the summer. And Dan is, with the tip of the spear as it relates to going out to making it successful because, you need support from other people. And I think more so will be coming in 28. Dan might talk about that. But without further ado, let me invite Dan Lovinger to join us. Welcome, Dan Lovinger. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. We're quite appreciative to have someone who's been doing what you're doing and who's been a friend and a great partner when I was there back at the old Comcast NBC Telemundo days. I see the Paris 2024 sweatshirt. Yeah. I miss the swag, I have to say. I miss the swag. I had more swag, God. And I still wear it. I got my 2018 World Cup jacket on and wearing my old stuff. But there's a point like, do I need any more swag? And then you don't get any. I can use a little swag.
All I need is your size, Ray. Just send me your size. I actually have a friend who is retired from sort of day-to-day life. He calls it his post-corporate career he's in now. And I told him I would keep him in golf balls for as long as I'm able to. So he gets a box a month.
And let me tell you, based on the way I play golf and where I play, you don't need to know my size.
Okay.
You just need to send golf balls. But anyway, that's all a joke. No, you got enough to do. Don't worry about it. And you've known Tony, a legend in all of our minds, including his.
Yes.
Gotta start somewhere.
I can't help myself. But no, dear friend, 46 years we shared a cubicle in BBDO, and we're having fun doing this, and we're really, I feel like getting our sea legs and having a good time, and it's really great to have you here. I think you might be sitting in the most exciting position in the industry, selling the Olympics, right? So tell us what you can about what it was like going in, what your expectations were, how did it meet those, how was it going out, and the one question I want to ask too, I know this is a lot, but it's all easy in, out, how'd I do, is I was thinking about being a guest of NBC's at the opening ceremony and what you actually saw, because the coverage was citywide, and I don't know where you had people, but that was just an aside, not nearly as important as the other things we'd love you to talk about.
I'll circle back. And by the way, thank you guys for having me. I mean, truly an honor. Two absolute legends, titans in our business. So it's rare you get to have a moment with guys like you. So I appreciate it. So, to answer your question, going into these Paris games, we were selling hope. We were selling possibility. We had gone through 3 really difficult Olympic games, all 3 of them Asian-based cities. So literally around the world from America. 2 out of those 3 affected by COVID, with no fans in the stands. Japan, Tokyo, and Beijing, China. And that the Beijing games, the most recent winter games, were really, really a difficult go because not only did you have COVID and no fans in the stands, but you had some geopolitical issues to contend with that really affected advertisers' interest and perhaps even, viewer interest. So we had these three games that were clearly going to be difficult. We knew Pyeongchang as well, which was, the Winter Games of 2018, was a place not many people really knew about or cared about. So it was difficult. So coming out of Beijing, what we really thought about was, does the consumer care enough? I was listening to some of your earlier comments, Ray, and you were talking about this notion of, essentially consumer interest in taking care of customers. And so what we did is we hired a third party to do a study of consumer engagement for the Olympic movement here in America, so that we could figure out what they really wanted, what they cared about, what they didn't care about. We did it across all different age groups, gender, sexual preference, orientation, everything. And we were able to cut it and slice it. And the good news is we learned that consumers still cared about the Olympics, but they just weren't necessarily in touch as much as they needed to be. And it varied by, demo, what they wanted more or less of. One of the things they all said they wanted, more of was ease of use. So, the blessing and the curse of having unlimited almost shelf space with a streamer like Peacock is we got up over 5,000 hours, actually closer to 7,000 hours of content. And now people, while that's exciting, they're also intimidated and confused. So the first thing we did was we reoriented Peacock. And, by all accounts, these Paris games were a huge hit. People loved Peacock. All the feedback we got was, wow, they nailed it. It's a really elegant consumer interface. I can watch what I want when I want. I can use, all new tools to find stuff. I can, watch specific shows, whether it was, the Kevin Hart and Kenan Thompson show, or of course the Gold Zone became a big hit. So we knew from the get-go that we had done something right with Peacock because we were getting nothing but rave reviews and people were signing up, which was obviously part of our business model. So going in, we had to sell the hope, and the hope was really Paris and what Paris means to people. It's the number one destination for Americans traveling abroad. Some of the iconic backdrops that you saw in our coverage, whether it was the Eiffel Tower as, right behind the beach volleyball, or the Gardens of Versailles with equestrian. We did surfing from Tahiti, which is a French colony. It all just, we knew it was going to work, but until it works, you're hoping. As we got out of these games, what we realized was the Olympics are back. And that's not a sales pitch. It's just a reality. I mean, we averaged over 30 million people a night. And it was all around appreciated. Some of the comments I got anecdotally that actually play out into the numbers, I was getting notes from people saying, thank you, my family is sitting together watching the Olympics. We haven't watched anything together in forever. And, again, comments on, Peacock being so on it. So we knew that we had done something right. But, for me during the games, what was, I guess, the most fulfilling part was when you look at a sort of a project like this, and you've got all of the different pieces of our company that are leaning into it, from, my group sales to marketing to production to finance and legal, ad operations. All of these groups have a plan, and we're aware of each other's plans, and, we're leaning into each other's plans. But watching when everybody's plan actually works, and then at the top of it, it interweaves. And so those, like the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. As I told my team, and we would have a daily meeting every morning in Paris at 11 o'clock, whether you're a first time Olympic seller or you've been doing it for 20 years, it's kind of a rare moment in time in anybody's career where you have this, everything works. and it's great. And I told the team, we're about 3/4 of the way through the games when I had this little speech, and I said, enjoy it, because if it happens once, you're lucky. If it happens twice, you're blessed, and 3 times, I don't think it ever does for a career. So this was one of those moments for everybody, and it felt great. So now we're leaving these Paris games with not just hope, but proof that the Olympics matter again, and it's awesome.
Wind in the sails in a big way, right? You were talking about hope. Now you're selling reality, and LA and US.
Yeah, we've got great locations moving forward, right? We're in Milan and Cortina for the Winter Games of 2026, and then on to LA, which will be the first home games on US soil, really in a generation for young people, right? It's really a huge deal to bring the games back to America, for all pieces of the business,
Right.
and for American consumers of the games. And then from LA, we've got another American Games that was recently announced in 2034. We bring the Winter Games back to Salt Lake, which will be awesome again.
Dan, one of the things I just took away from what you said is, and I think a great learning experience is you guys really did your homework, because the Olympics did have this amazing halo effect, but it didn't happen by accident. You sort of took a clean piece of paper and said, let's build this back up, understand what it is about the Olympics, the consumer. And Ray and I talked a lot about, when companies focus on the consumer, generally that's the better result, right? And my takeaway, having spent time back in the Ebersol days and understanding his production, I thought the production was brilliant, from a consumer standpoint, because I would watch the live event, right? Because generally, because of the time difference, you could watch whatever event, the swimming, the gymnastics live, but then how you packaged it in prime time to give more insight and background really made it a reason to watch as well. It was more than just the results. So it was really brilliant, I think, production, and those folks obviously need to be saluted. And I'm sure your advertisers appreciated that all as well.
Yeah. And it's great that people recognize that the work that Molly Solomon and Joe Jeshu and the entire production team did, it dates back years and years and years, but it all does focus, you're right, Tony, on the consumer experience. And knowing that we would have 2 bites at the apple, Paris prime time, which was daytime here in America, when most of the events were happening live, and then bringing them back to a U.S. primetime audience, we had this opportunity to tell a story in a different way. And I think some of the new ways we did it, we used technology. At one point, I don't know if you guys picked up on it, we did a segment where we put a heart rate monitor on one of the moms of one of the swimmers, Ryan Murphy's mom.
God.
And she spiked all the way up to 162 beats a minute, by the way.
Great.
And
Stroke.
it was a really cool ad, right? I mean, we added way to show, how the parents cared so much. We also were able to do something with an advertiser. We had Figs, who are a licensee for Team USA. They're a medical they sell scrubs. They sponsored the segment, so it kind of made sense. But it was fun, and it was a new way to tell a story in prime time. But yeah, I think the production was really, really important, but also telling the story on a platform that mattered most to the consumer mattered as well. So what we were able to do, and we've done a lot of this, but we really turned the screws on it, was we worked with all the social platforms for the younger audiences in particular. And we were able to not just take highlights and push them out on their platforms, but we actually brought their influencers to Paris. We gave them behind the scenes access, and they were able to create content that was more relevant for their audiences on their platforms that we then sold into and were
Right.
able to monetize. So,
Right.
you had great content on the right places, with the right advertising model behind it, and
Good.
it all showed up and worked.
That's
Yeah.
smart. Smart.
All right. So one question, and then we'll go to the. Gosh, this could be a very good and 3-part show.
Okay.
But no, I'm listen. This is all gold.
I'm in for all the rides, Ray. You tell me.
But on the opening ceremony night, where did the client go?
So we were on one of the bridges over the River Seine.
Okay.
So you had fans lining the banks of the river, with the stands on the side, and then a number of the bridges were available for viewing. So we were on a bridge. We had a section of the bridge the NBC Hospitality did. We had some incredible stars with us. What was crazy was it was pouring. It was it was the only day we saw rain during these Paris games.
Wow.
And it didn't just rain, it poured, and everybody was given these white ponchos that the organizing committee had handed out when you entered. So we were all looking the same, wearing the same. But once you got past the fact that it was pouring and you were just drenched, it was fun. Everybody had a blast.
Good.
But what was interesting for me anyway was our viewing experience was very different than sort of the curated experience that folks saw at home.
Right.
That NBC puts together. We take the opening ceremony from the organizing committee, right? They produce it. We don't produce the content. And then we put our spin on it with our hosts. And it's a very different look than when you're sitting on a bridge, drinking cocktails, having fun. And yeah, there are some big screens that you can see, and certainly some monitors within our hospitality, but it's not as pieced together. It's really just a celebration when you're there.
Right. Yeah. I was at a Super Bowl way back where it just poured and you just didn't move. It's okay. You're a Super Bowl. Don't complain. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No
Exactly.
complaining at a Super Bowl or an Olympics.
Yeah.
Part 2 of this podcast will be available next week. For more information, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com. Thank you.